Welcome back to another episode of Badgers Talk here with Rohan Chakravarthi, everybody. It's official visit season. Wisconsin Badgers, they've got their couple of weeks of official visits. The 2025 class is in full blow now. And I've got my good friend over there at 247, Nick Osen, here with me. Nick, how you doing today, my guy?
I'm doing great, man. This is one of the most fun kind of times of the recruiting season. We've been talking about doing kind of a preview follow-up type show for a while and grateful that we can be on and making it happen, my guy.
Yes, sir. As you guys know, I mean, the 2025 class, Wisconsin's got a real busy next few weeks, especially these first two official visit weekends where, you might see a lot of news kind of coming in and out after a lot of these visits. We're going to go position by position, break it down, see what we kind of think about Wisconsin's class kind of heading into official visit season, and then we'll go from there. We'll start off, though, obviously, with one of the easier positions, kind of quarterbacks. The Wisconsin Badgers, they've got a commitment from Landon Locke, the 2025 three-star, high three-star. He's been committed for a while. Obviously, the brother of Braden Locke. What are your thoughts kind of on this quarterback class for Wisconsin with Landon Locke being the main guy?
Yeah, I really like it. I think he's a guy that he split reps, kind of earlier on in his career. So I think he could have picked up more offers. I think he could be rated even higher. So I think this is going to be just a really nice fall for him. I like his size. I love his arm strength. I think his ball placement has been really impressive. I saw some recent highlights kind of from spring ball a little bit. So I love what he can do. He's probably already getting kind of familiar with the offense, obviously having his brother here already, who, as we both know, had a good spring, and you would think is kind of that guy next year, at least, for Wisconsin. So I really like it. I think it's always impressive to get a guy, of course, that has some other big time offers, but also to get him kind of in the class so early. And he was
Right.
a very, very early commit for this class. I definitely feel like maybe with kind of some of the departures like Nick Evers, that depth is definitely going to be a good thing to have, and that you hope to add that kind of throughout, whether it's a walk-on player or kind of a fringe scholarship guy just around portals or things like that. But in terms of long term for this class and just potential starters, I really like the kid, and I think that this fall could be really, really big for him.
Now you bring up some really good points. Landon Locke, obviously, the big thing is they got him really early. The connection
Hmm.
was there with his older brother Braden. Feels like it, at least on the early portion, Landon Locke might have a little bit more potential just given the measurables and the way that he's shaping up going into his senior year of football. But you're right. Badgers, I mean, quarterback is one of the more important positions. They're trying to go one per cycle. The one question for me that I kind of have
Hmm.
now at quarterback is with the departures, you might have gotten one. It's not maybe that it was unexpected, but you were probably think you were going to go into the fall with five scholarship quarterbacks. You have four right now, with one of them, Cole LaCrue, not having practiced really much of the last 2 years. You're a little thin in numbers. You're going to be at four at the moment next year with Van Dyke leaving the program with eligibility, Landon Locke coming in. And so that was the thing, but I'm assuming that might be more for the next cycle with Locke kind of being your solidified guy as you've known for a little bit in the 25 class.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, my friend. I get that sense. And again, you can always add like a potential walk on arm or, a guy that was a really good athlete slash quarterback, that maybe played some safety, things like that in high school that you see. And I think those guys are often brought on, just to be in a big time room. And then you kind of see what can happen long term with their growth. But overall, I really like, Locke as the QB. I love that family connection. And I think I'm just really intrigued when we're, maybe doing a podcast during the season in October, November to see some more senior film that he could have shown in his final season in Texas.
I agree. Let's go on to the next position, which is another intriguing one.
Hmm.
2024 class, Wisconsin takes three running backs, three fairly talented running backs, that is, with Darion Dupree, Dylan Jones, and Gideon Natuka. You now have the 2025 class where it doesn't seem like you're going to take as many. Likely, it feels like you're going to take one running back, but there are a number of intriguing candidates out there. Talk to me about what you see from these 2025 running backs. A couple of them having official visits ahead of the next few weeks.
Yeah, so I think this is a spot where there is, of course, you want to get a guy, at least one, and a really talented player, but there's really no semblance of like high pressure just because of what you know that you got in the last class. And I mean, I was working on kind of a mailbag segment I do for later this week. Rohan, I could see at least two of those guys from that group just in that class making the NFL. So I think that the talent is there. I know that we were both impressed, even with some of the returning guys that will still be back next year or are expected back, that aren't losing their eligibility or anything like that to go to the next level. So a few of those names would be, and I'm not going in any specific order here. I really like all of the guys that I'm going to mention. I'll start with top 247 running back Byron Lewis. So Wisconsin's done a nice job here already. Really impressive, even getting him to campus for an OB. Some of the teams to really watch: Florida State. There's been a lot of buzz there with him. Ohio State's been in the mix, but there are like three or four running backs that kind of some of my colleagues at Ohio State's website like that they feel good about. And then Miami's been in the mix too. So I think those are the top 4 or 5 schools to watch for him. You've got Javen Gordon, who was, he's picked up his recruitment in a major way the last couple months. I think Wisconsin helped start that. I love his size. I really like his film. Running back from Georgia, going against pretty strong competition. I think that maybe fans maybe don't know as much about him, but I'm definitely a fan of his game. I believe Northwestern's in that mix, and again, he got a couple other recent offers. Duke, I believe, is in there as well, and then John Forster, who, if I were to pick who leads right now, I would probably go with Wisconsin, at least based on my last conversation with him after a visit here. So he is, expected here for an OB in a couple weeks. Rutgers is another school in there. Illinois, West Virginia, North Carolina, a little bit from what I've seen. He just actually dropped a list, down to 5. So I think swap out Illinois there. But yeah, West Virginia, Illinois, Rutgers, maybe Syracuse. So Wisconsin, definitely a school to watch. I think that I would peg them as the school to watch right now. And I think as long as you get one of those guys and maybe you take it into the fall, check out some senior film, see if anybody really pops. But I think that's very safe when you look at what you got in the last cycle.
I mean, you break it down really well. You got 3 in the last cycle. Currently, you have 8 scholarship running backs. And as I was doing, the normal work, heading into this 25 class, of those 8 players, 6 are projected to return next year. Only 2 are seniors, Ches
Yep.
Malusi and Tawi Walker. You're obviously expecting a big step up from your freshman class next year. You're not in a bad spot when it comes to running backs, be it depth or be it the youth. You've got a lot of options. You mentioned the 3 guys, really the 3 top targets for Wisconsin. There is a little bit of intrigue with each of them in regards to kind of that hometown draw. Byron Lewis, obviously getting a lot of Florida draw, Florida State in there, Miami in there. You talk about John Forster, a guy from New Jersey, getting that Rutgers draw. And then I believe Javen Gordon. I don't know how, involved they are, but I believe Georgia Tech's also kind of involved in there. So you kind of have a hometown draw for all 3. But Wisconsin's done a good job with all 3, not only to get official visits, but to be pretty high in each recruitment, going into official visit season. Like you said, the goal is likely to take 1. If you can take 1, you're good. And I think they're in a good position to do that. Moving on, though, to wide receivers. This one is a loaded official visit,
Yeah.
class. Break it down for me, brother.
Absolutely. So first off, you've got one of my favorite players in the class already committed. That's Cam Miller from New Jersey. We've got him as a high 3-star right now. I personally think he gets to that 4-star status, like cumulative, here this fall. Good size for a slot guy. He'd be a little bit small on the outside, but he plays it in high school. He's about 5'11", maybe 5'11 and a half, 170 range. So, you want to get around maybe 175, 180. Good hands, good route runner, great speed, explosive, and nice with the ball in his hands. He's got a good yak ability there. So he's already in. And some of the other top names to really watch kind of throughout these next few weekends. I'll start with Davion Chandler, somebody that has kind of risen up my personal board recently. I mean, I'm obviously with 247, but he was at a rivals camp and tweeted out some of those highlights. He looks really good. So, he's a guy definitely to watch. We caught up last week, and Purdue's another school to watch in there. And then he was figuring out kind of his last OV or two. Indiana, a big school to watch for him as well, an in-state program there. I would put Wisconsin and Indiana among kind of that top group, and then I think he was between Purdue and Kansas for a final OV. You've got Eugene Hilton, another player from Indiana that the staff has done a phenomenal job with. There's a little bit of Clemson buzz, a little bit of Michigan, but I think this comes down to Wisconsin and Georgia. Muiz Tunkara, a recent offer. Now I know we talked throughout spring ball about kind of getting that outside, the boundary wide out with good size. He would fit that mold very well. I think going off memory, 6'3", maybe 200, 198, 200 pounds in that range. I talked to him after the offer, called the Badgers one of his dream offers. So certainly a guy to watch there. Vernon Allen expected to officially visit later, another kind of wide out with size. His recruitment's been a little bit quieter just in terms of like being able to see things, really from the outside. Some strong offers there as well. And then Cam Flowers would be similar to Cam Miller in terms of just like a slot guy, but really, really quick. Like he could fly. So those are a few of the names I definitely have my eye on. I think when you've got a guy like Miller already in, I think you're already doing something very good. But if you could get, say, Tunkara and then, I don't know, Chandler. So, I mean, we'll see obviously how it shakes out and, if they take 2, 3, whatever that may look like. I think those would be some great, great potential additions to the program.
You break it down well. I mean, this class, like you said, it's a pretty stacked class. You look back at 24, Wisconsin didn't get an outside guy. They went with one guy, Kyan Barry Johnson, got him very early, got a slot guy, and he looks like he should be a contributor sooner than later. This is the class, though. It feels like Wisconsin understands they're going to look to get talent both inside and outside. Got a very talented guy, Cameron Miller. You got him early, good size, another slot guy there. And then you've got a mix of slot guys and outside guys here that you have official visits for. You talk about some of those outside guys, Moise Tunkara, who's coming in early. You've got Vernon Allen. You've got Eugene Hilton. Those three guys are all, guys with pretty good size on the outside, something Wisconsin's looking for. And then you've got the speedsters and those guys kind of on the inside, Davion Chandler, Miller, who's already committed, Cam Flowers. You've got to mix a lot. You've got a good mix, really, to where Wisconsin can kind of feel this out, see how, see where players kind of fall on their boards and evaluate, because a lot of these players have Wisconsin pretty high on their boards, and rightfully so. They've done pretty well with all of these recruitments. I'm expecting 3 guys in this class. Miller obviously being an addition already where you don't have to worry about, going after another guy during this official visit season. I think that's a good sign. But I think Wisconsin, is doing pretty well at the receiver position in this class and should come away with a couple of dudes.
Yeah, I totally agree. We broke down kind of the similar names. So I just feel like as long as you get at least one of the top 2 or 3 guys we each mentioned,
Yeah.
along with Miller, and you see what happens, that's a really good class because again, wideout is a spot that while you're expected to lose potentially a couple guys, ideally to the NFL, when I think of Will Pauling, like there's still really some good depth there, especially with some of the more recent additions. You know what the inside guy is going to look like with Trech Kakayuna. So those are kind of the expectations. But yeah, wideout, again, you want to add more, but the position is sitting in a pretty good spot now that Cam Miller made his recent commitment about a week and a half ago.
I agree. I mean, like you said, the additions, especially the recent addition of Joseph Griffith Jr., young guy. He's got eligibility. Really, you're expected to maybe lose 2 guys next year with, Will Pauling and Bryson Green potentially to the NFL. You're still in a lot of good shape with the way that they built the depth over the last 2 years with all of the incoming transfers and some of the younger guys on both the outside and the inside. Agree there. Now we go to one of the more intriguing positions in this class, tight end. Wisconsin goes for 2 tight ends last year. Grant Steck, a guy who they evaluated very early, a guy who they were able to get a 4-star, and then a high 3-star with Rob Booker, the in-state guy who flipped back to Wisconsin on National Signing Day. Wisconsin's got a couple of tight ends coming in here. Seems like the expectation is that they take one in this class, but they've got a couple of intriguing names. Did strike out on a couple of in-state guys, but there's still a couple of guys that they're interested in. What do you feel here about the tight end group?
Yeah, I think, some of the in-state guys, I don't think, of course, they fully pursued. Flanagan was obviously a guy they were definitely in on. But, I feel pretty good about this first name. I'm going to say Nazai Davis, another guy from Indiana. I mean, that state is doing really well with talent, and Wisconsin is doing well with those players. So, that's kind of Kansas is in there. Purdue certainly in the mix there. And then the Badgers, I would say pretty comfortably. I think Wisconsin is in a really encouraging spot going into this first OV weekend. That's when he's expected to get to Madison. He's built a pretty good relationship with Nate Letton. I think the staff as a whole has done a nice job there. I like him in maybe like a hybrid flex type spot. His highlights are really good. He's got a basketball background as well. So I'd be pretty encouraged. Another name to watch, later on in the visit season, potentially Ryman Zeber, a guy from Nebraska who, when we caught up after he got the Wisconsin offer back in like late winter, midwinter, he was all about Wisconsin. Now I think they're certainly heavily in there. I think Nebraska, the in-state program, is in there for him. He's got a couple other visits that he had mentioned to me as well in a recent story. So those are a couple names, certainly off the top of my mind. Tyler Kielmeyer, we talked a few weeks back, and he was still kind of figuring things out, with his potential schedule. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if Nazai Davis comes to visit, loves it, and potentially calls this thing early in favor of Wisconsin.
You're right. I mean, Desai Davis is the guy kind of to me to watch because that first visit was pretty big. Desai Davis, I believe, is expected to have three official visits. He's got Kansas and Purdue on his list. Those are the weekends of the 14th and the 21st. You've got some time there. And Wisconsin is pretty high on him. They're looking for that one tight end in the class. He's got pretty good size. He might be one of those, one of those flexed out tight ends around 6'4", 220 pounds. You could fit in a role for him as you're trying to get more vertical with the tight ends. I think he's a guy who, like you said, from Indiana, pretty good size, in what Wisconsin's looking for at that specific position. I think he's a guy that you could go out and get. You've also got another guy that you could be potentially in the mix for, Jaden Savory. I believe he's taken an official visit as well. And then you've got Raymond Zybert, who, if things work out and you still have that spot available when Zybert comes in for his official visit, that's a guy who they could definitely seriously take a look at. Of course, the in-state draw with Nebraska is there. He got a couple of other visits. Michigan State, I believe, is in there as well. But yeah, I mean, tight end seems like you only got six guys, but the thing, like they kind of have with some of these other groups, Wisconsin's put themselves in a position. They've got a lot of young guys with this group. With the transfers that they brought in, with the two freshmen they brought in, they don't have many numbers, but they've got a lot of young numbers and the guys who they're kind of excited for the future at the position already on campus.
Yeah, I mean, you think of McGowan, Ashcraft, Seagraves, the two recent freshmen, like no need to really add more than one guy unless, again, you're just blown away. I just don't expect a ton of really attrition in this group. I believe Nowakowski's out of eligibility after this season, but I think youth is there, talent is there, and now we're looking to see some of that production really come together this fall.
Exactly. Offensive lineman, Wisconsin 2024 class, they went crazy at it. I mean, us two, we're both pretty stoked about that 24 class where you have five recruits come in. A couple of those tackles, you've got Kevin Haywood, Derek Jensen. You got a couple of interior guys, blue chipper Emerson Mandel. You've got Ryan Corey. And then obviously we got to see a little bit of Colin Coverly here during the spring. Already got your two tackles kind of in this class. You got Cam Clark, who made a commitment, the Michigan recruit, and then obviously the in-state Michael Roski, who's kind of been committed for a long, long time here for Wisconsin. How do you feel about this group going into official visit season?
Yeah, my friend, you saw me smile a little bit when you brought up this group. I'm pretty excited about the potential. I think first off, you hit on a lot of the talent that is already in the room or, will be officially in a week or so, right? When the rest of the enrollees get here. So I think the 2024 group is phenomenal. I think that Clark, after a year and a half with strength and development, is going to be a good player. I think Roski could be a really special player. I've been impressed getting to know him a little bit. He's really a leader in this class. And they've got some pretty big time guys getting to campus. Somebody that I spoke with recently, Logan Powell, we've got him as a top 247 player He told me himself he can play a lot of spots, but maybe like Coverly projects a little bit better to the interior. Nolan Davenport, I'm going to say a 4-star guy. I think we've got him as an 89, but I'm pretty confident he'll end up as a 4-star
Yeah.
this fall. That one is one of the quietest recruitments I have seen just because I haven't seen a lot of interviews out there. Penn State is in there. Michigan State is in there. He's expected to camp with Ohio State to try to get that in-state offer. He's obviously from Ohio, like I mentioned, so he's a big one. And then somebody that I reported this past week before, that was kind of sent out there, and I am pumped and impressed. And I think that Coach AJ Blazik and the staff get a ton of credit for getting him on an OB is Hardy Watts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the top players in the Northeast as a whole, one of the top interior linemen in the country. And man, as you've seen, he's got offers from just about everywhere you can think of. Clemson's deep in there, Michigan, Boston
Alabama.
College is in the mix. Yeah, Bam, he's got SEC offers. I don't see him going to the
Yeah.
SEC. I think, some of those schools, it wouldn't shock me at all if he ends up in the Big Ten, whether it's here, Michigan. We'll see kind of how things shake out. But just the fact that he'll be coming. So I feel like you'd love at least one of those guys. Potentially, you get two. There are some names scheduled to visit a little bit later as well. But just if you can hit on, and I'd even say one of those three with the base of the class that you already have as a 3-star and a potential 4-star in Roski, pretty good back-to-back classes on the O-line, man.
Oh yeah. I mean, we know the 24 class was good, and you've got the
Mhm.
solidified pieces at tackle. The Badgers, they got that out of the way. You're looking at some of these interior pieces, and it's kind of been fluid. A couple of guys where Wisconsin's jumping later, a couple of guys where, it's fizzled out a little bit, but the group that they're kind of bringing in is still pretty strong. You brought up Nolan Davenport, guy I got to speak with earlier this week. That official visit I'm very intrigued with. He's coming in the first weekend. He's got a couple of visits: Penn State, you mentioned, Michigan State, Missouri, that he's planning to do. But this is a guy who's had a relationship with Coach Blazik for a while, because Blazik recruited him back when Blazik was at Vanderbilt. And so, that recruitment has been going on for a while. Obviously, the draw to Wisconsin is there. Intrigued to see what role he ultimately kind of ended up playing if he ultimately ends at Wisconsin. But he's a guy to watch. Hardy Watts is a guy who's kind of, a guy who definitely you consider as one of the top interior guys in the class. East Coast, I believe he's from Massachusetts, and he's got, like you said, a lot of offers to his name. If Wisconsin can pull that one out, that would be a big one for the program. Logan Powell's been a guy, though, that they've been on for a long time. A guy who I think I got to give him credit for doing well in this recruitment. He's not a guy from the state. He's from, he attends college, high school in Arizona. He's a guy, though Wisconsin has kind of remained steadfast with their communication with 4-star recruit. He's coming in pretty early, I believe the second weekend of official visits. And like I said, Wisconsin has 5 offensive linemen from the 24 class. You already got 2 in the 25 class. If you can find a way to pull out, maybe 2 of these interior offensive linemen, you're looking really strong, especially heading into next season, where you might see some attrition across the offensive line, with the seniors and things like that. But you might put yourself in a position where you really don't have to worry going forward with the way that your group is going.
Yeah, totally. I'm in full agreement with you. I think relationships are so big at a position like that, where, kind of those elite guys are at a premium. There are not a ton of those guys really out there, especially that can play multiple spots. So I think a lot of credit, goes to that group. And I'm excited to talk a little bit of defense as well.
Let's start there. Defensive line, I think this is a group where we've seen a little bit of, in and out. Obviously, the decommitment of Torrin Petaway happened a little bit ago. Wisconsin right now, though, they've got a good amount of defensive linemen as well coming onto campus. That's kind of the theme throughout. What's your take here on this position group as we kind of head into official visit season?
Yeah, I would say there's a good amount of guys that I feel pretty encouraged for Wisconsin. And it's just going to be about, really how things shake out. A lot of these guys have several visits scheduled. Cade Peterchek, I don't know exactly how to say that perfectly, but I believe, that's pretty accurate. North Dakota kid doesn't do a ton of interviews, basically a four-star player. Wisconsin is deep into that mix. Oklahoma's in there, Kansas State, I believe Nebraska. I expect him to take some of those OBs. He'll be getting here that second OB weekend. Staff has done a fantastic job with him. The Badgers are very high up there. Wouldn't shock me at all if he ends up in Madison. A couple other guys that really come to mind. Wilnerson Telemack is kind of rising on my personal board. I think he'd be a great fit. I like his film, good athleticism. Drayden Pavey, an Ohio kid, Cincinnati Taft. I think the Badgers are in a great spot for him. I expect him to take, I think he's got four OBs. He dropped the top three. My memory here, we were actually hanging out together at Union South when he dropped that top three, but then I believe he's still taking an OB to NC State. So it's Wisconsin, Purdue, I believe Indiana, and NC State deep in there for him. And wouldn't shock me if he might camp at a couple spots closer to home as well. But yeah, Badgers, I would probably say Coach Whitlow's doing the best out of anybody, just in terms of a D line, group and really his recruitment. And then a kid that I spoke with this week that just got offered, Kyler Garcia, also has an OB scheduled. So I think several names there, really good start, and I think you get at least ideally two of those top guys to kind of go along with. I mean, we'll see where you consider Jaden Lofton, either a big outside linebacker or somebody that can play kind of a DN type spot. I think he's got the size and versatility. But before we move to linebackers and things, those are some of the guys to really watch right now. I expect Wisconsin to hit on a couple there.
Yeah, good you mentioned Lofton. I kind of consider him maybe as that outside linebacker, a bit of that bigger role. We've seen Wisconsin, especially this past year, involve some of those bigger outside linebackers. D line, though, interesting group. I think Wisconsin ends up with two players here. At least that's their expectation. Maybe initially we're thinking some more, but I think right now they're looking at two. And I think you go for some fluidity. You go for a guy who you could bulk up to be an edge rusher, or a guy playing defensive end, Cade Peterjack. And then a guy like Drayden Pavey, a guy who I know you were kind of early on it in terms of his recruitment and the way Wisconsin was kind of trending upwards for him. A D tackle, I mean, he's got size for sure already. That he's got a good frame to play college ball, and that's early on in the process. The one that I'm watching there is if he camps at Ohio State, how that process ultimately goes later in the summer. But he's got an official visit to Wisconsin. You've got, I believe you mentioned him, Abu Tarawale coming in as well. I think Wisconsin's also in a good spot here in the sense that you've got a lot of players coming at different weekends. In the sense that if the
Yeah.
beginning portion of official visits maybe don't go your way as much, you still have options that are pretty well regarded on your board that you could target later in the official visit season as well.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I think not only are they getting visits, but like you mentioned, I think at wideout, uh, you know, they're deep in it for some of these guys. Wisconsin, either a leader or top two, I'd say for at least three of those players. I'm glad you're coming around on Pavey too. I think for an interior guy, I do think he'd be an awesome fit. He seemed to really bond with Coach Whitlow. So yeah, it's an intriguing group because they maybe don't have a guy committed there yet, but I think that, like I said, there will be a couple here pretty quickly, whether that's first couple weekends or you see a bit more of a later flow later in June.
I agree. I agree. We'll go with the outside linebacker edge rusher group, a group that right now has a couple of intriguing names for Wisconsin for sure. But the official visit kind of group here, or official visit season, will be important here. Maybe to try and nail that third guy. Samuel Latehu, Brennan Ains. Those are the two guys Wisconsin got early in the season. After that junior day kind of period, Wisconsin was able to get some commitments in that regard. They're looking though for a third guy. They've got their eyes on some pretty big targets. What do you think about this group here?
Yeah, this group is oozing with talent already in the class, and they've got some big time players coming this weekend. Like this first OV weekend, that includes Jaden Woods, who I've been fortunate to kind of cover his recruitment for a long time. Iowa State was an early offer there when I was down in Ames. You got Jaden Lofton. Now, I think that recruitment is going to be pretty consistent throughout a couple schools. I think that he is somebody that's going to take some visits before making this decision. Penn State is a school that's deep in there. Nebraska's done a solid job. A guy that's coming later that I actually forgot to mention on another show that I was recently breaking down, just as a collective. But like I said, the OV's coming later. Nicholas Clayton, somebody from Florida. I spoke with him. Seemed pretty pumped about this visit. The in-state Seminoles are going to host him, so there's always kind of potential there with an in-state school connection. But for outside, those are a few of the names I'm really keying in on right now. I'd say similar about Woods, that like he's keeping things pretty close to the vest. I think the OVs, often, my friend, and for people that don't know, I'd say as is human nature, you go into OV season as a young man, as a player, and you've kind of got a feel of where you want to go. I think Jaden Woods is somebody, at least from my conversations with him, that this thing is pretty wide open. And I think OVs will be the deciding factor for his recruitment this next month and a half.
Yeah, Wisconsin's in two pretty big recruitments here or three, excuse me, with Jaden Woods, who's got some pretty big offers and some pretty big official visits on his docket. You got Jaden Lofton, of course, two pretty well regarded 4 stars, and then like you mentioned, a guy who's coming a little bit later with Nicholas Clayton, the Florida native, who I believe has Florida State up there. Even UCF has kind of had some of that hometown draw, but mainly the Seminoles are kind of a team to watch there. You've got a couple of guys. To me, though, Wisconsin's done a
Nebraska
good job.
too. Nebraska
Nebraska,
too in there.
good mention. But right now you got a couple of guys with Ains and Lete who the staff identified early, trying to get some of those guys before the recruitment skyrocketed. You probably want one more. Potentially even two, but likely one more to kind of fill out the group. You got a couple of options here. I think official visit season, especially these first 2 weekends, though, are going to be pretty big for the Badgers as they try and close some of these guys out.
Yeah, switching to inside, because
Let's do it.
obviously a massive name. Now he's got the versatility to play both, so I always leave that open a little bit. I believe when we caught up last time, he implied that inside would make maybe some of the most sense. Number one on the board for many of these fans, that'd be Mason Posa.
Mason Posa. Yep.
He'll be coming this weekend. Look, Wisconsin's they had been doing a really good job already. But after this last visit, I know, checking in on the recruitment, speaking with Posa twice within a week, they crushed that visit. And now I would put Wisconsin up there with anybody. The top schools to really watch here: Wisconsin, Oregon, Texas A&M. Texas Tech is in there, but I'd be a little surprised if he ends up there. I'm not like at a crystal ball type level. However, if you asked me right now, man, you've got to make a pick here. Where does Posa end up? I do think I'd probably say in Madison as of right now. Luke Fickell, Coach Tressel, Coach Mitchell, Max Steinecker, like the staff, everybody has done an amazing job, with really the entire recruiting department, with Mason Posa, really feeling good, welcome, prioritized. So that's a major name on the entire board to really know. Elliot Shaper is another name at linebacker that's expected to OV. I put in an early crystal ball just because of how he talked about Wisconsin, and we'll see. Some of the other OBs. I believe he's getting to Duke and a couple other schools really in the mix there. But I felt pretty comfortable. Wisconsin felt like the leader, and we'll see kind of what things look like in the next couple weeks at this spot.
I think this is an intriguing group because you talk about two names. Posa obviously is, a pretty big one. A lot of fans like him, but he's a guy who could play inside outside. I think, to me, if he's a guy who wants to commit, you take him regardless of the position, and you've kind of figured it out. If later on, a high 4-star, a lot of offers. Obviously, he's a guy coming in early, and the question to me is, if Posa commits, does Wisconsin look to take both Posa and Shaper? You already have Cooper Conolano, a guy who's been, the number one on your board for a long time. He's coming in. That to me will be the big question, and obviously you got to see one domino fall to see if that question ultimately comes true. But Wisconsin's put themselves in a good position for Mason Posa. We'll see if that ultimately comes, to fruition, though, as official visit season kicks off. Let's move on, though, to the defensive back group. Wisconsin has some intriguing guys already on the team. Remington Moss,
Yeah.
a guy who, in my opinion, he was a guy who I liked pretty early in the process and now has kind of really grown. Could see him as an outside corner, could also see him, running that safety position as well. Jamie or Scott, a guy who committed, after that junior day, another guy with some pretty good size. You've got some intriguing safety options, Grant Dean and Luke Emmerich. Don't know necessarily if they'll both end up at safety. You could try them out at different positions, but guys with just blazing fast speed,
Hmm.
track guys for sure. You've got a couple of guys in this group, as well as a couple of guys coming into town. Talk to me about how you feel on the defensive back front.
Yeah, this is a spot that I don't think there was much pressure, just because of your last class, because of some of the young talent we have seen at practice. And by the way, you've already got, 3, 4 guys committed, like 4 guys, and we'll just see where they kind of end up, like you mentioned. Certainly a couple of those guys will be at safety. A few of the names to really follow as DBs right now, just thinking in my head a little bit. Mason Alexander, early OV, another Indiana talent, really impressive kid. I think we've got him as a high 3-star. I believe he's a composite 4. Pretty good size, really good wingspan, good length. I think he's possessed the versatility. I'm just intrigued to kind of continue to watch his development. We've got Raheem Stroud. He's a true corner in my eyes, certainly. He's got, I'm trying to think exactly what it was. Maybe 4.3, 4.4 speed. I don't want to mess it up, but he's known for his speed. He's got good size, length, plays at Tampa Bay Tech, a good program down in Florida. Those are a couple names that initially, come to mind. Wisconsin's still pretty deep in the mix for Trey Poteet. I haven't heard a ton about him the last few months. I don't think he often, kind of goes out and talks about his recruitment. I think things have been
Right.
kept pretty quiet there, which is totally, really understandable. And then a few names a little bit later in the month in the process. Charles Bell Jr., somebody that just announced he was getting here to an OV. Naeem Parrish is intriguing to me. Now he's an athlete, both literally and figuratively in terms of just his position on 247 and what I've seen from him. Good basketball player, he kind of had like that 5'11, 175, 180, kind of size. I just spoke with him. That'll come down to like Wisconsin, Minnesota, maybe Arizona State. But I see Wisconsin hitting on at least 1 or 2 of those really top guys. And then you kind of go from there. But like you said, my friend, you already have a really good base for the DB room already.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Wisconsin has done a good job the last 2 classes.
Yeah,
The
great.
2020, that first class that Pickle came in where they were really just immediately putting the pieces together in December, they had 6 defensive backs in that class. That was the class with Amari Snowden, guys like Justin Taylor. You had a lot of different names in that class. Maybe I think one has transferred out so far, but still a good base. And then this last class, talk about a last class. I mean,
Hmm.
you find a way to get Xavier Lucas on the campus. You have a couple of freshman corners and safeties. You'll see ultimately where they all fill out. But defensive back has been really strong the last 2 classes. It seems like it's going that way, and I think that's also allowed Wisconsin to kind of just take a couple of shots, on diamonds in the rough. See. Take a shots on some athletes and then just figure out kind of what they can do with those athletes later on because they've had some success on the recruiting front. To me, when you look at this class, I agree with you. Mason Alexander's the guy there. Raheem Stroud might be more on the outside, might play a little, or sorry, he could be a nickel guy, or he could play in that field position on the outside. A guy who Wisconsin has been high on. I believe he's still taking an official to the school. Don't think he ends up here right now. Zay Gentry, obviously the hometown draw with SMU. I know you were covering his recruitment pretty well, but he's a guy there as well. But really, to me, as long as you are able to get maybe 1 or 2 of those guys, you already have a good base. You've got Moss, you've got Scott. You can figure out where they ultimately end up playing. I think that you're in a good shape right now with the amount of guys scheduled to take official visits to the school.
Yeah, I think maybe out of any of these positions, like really encouraging spot because you just know with this staff and what they can do, especially in this defense, they're going to get some corners. Like you know that. So I feel like this one's wide open in a really good way. Like I'm excited to see what happens because if you ask me, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Wisconsin led for Alexander. I think they do lead for Stroud, and then some of the guys may be coming later. Like you mentioned, we'll see about Gentry. I haven't really, kind of gotten or really even checked in, looked into that a little bit more recently. Wisconsin was doing a phenomenal job, but he did make a recent, commitment to in-state SMU. So we'll see if he ends up taking more visits. I know that SMU was a school to watch there for a long time, but again, there's no need to, really show any desperation with just the DBs as a whole because of that base you've got. I love how they got an in-state guy. They get Emmerich from Minnesota. You've got speed. You've got great cover ability in a guy like Jameer Scott. I think he could be a four-star guy when it's all said and done. So really, really good base in the DB room. And as we know, man, I mean, a group, I'd say, especially at corner, that is almost overflowing with young talent in Madison.
I agree. I got to ask you one last question before we get on out of here. We just broke down, every position on the group or on the board. What do you think could be the most exciting group for the Badgers in this 25 class? You've done a ton of work into it. Tell me about your thoughts.
Yeah, I appreciate that, my guy. I think to me, if things shape up how I could kind of see, I think it's easily linebacker to me. I mean, you have already somebody I saw live, Cooper Catalano, phenomenal kid, a thumper, a guy that can move but is not afraid to hit, a real leader. You've got Ains who can kind of do it all with his speed. Sam Leteju, physical, athletic, high ceiling type player that is, still reaching his ceiling. I said how I feel about Mason Posa. I'm sure Wisconsin, I think Lofton will be tough, but a guy like Jaden Woods or Nick Clayton, like neither would surprise me if they end up Badgers. So I just feel like with not only the sheer numbers, but the versatility and talent in that room, a room that we've seen completely change shape since last year, I would personally go with the LBs.
I agree. If I was going to give a position, it was going to be inside linebacker. I'll group them all together. I mean, this is an intriguing thing because Wisconsin, when the staff came here, the linebacker group, struggled a little bit, especially in this specific system for how Wisconsin's defense wanted to play. Now you talk about just a complete influx of talent this past offseason, and you're now seeing them, kind of turn things up on the recruiting front as well with a pretty big recruiting class that should amount at both positions. Wisconsin did a good job, at linebacker, and it seems like they're prioritizing that position for Mike Tristle's defense, be it on the inside or the outside, with the way that things are going.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, I feel like, yeah, after this season, you're expected to lose some of the top players,
Right.
especially at outside, but certainly at inside as well. Jaheim Thomas, and we've seen Analu Lafaeli, Thomas Heiberger, like some of these young talents that are already here, really impressing us in the spring. So I think the linebackers are in a great spot for years to come. And if I had to put a 1B, we'll mix it up and add an offensive spot. I'd go with wide out.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel you there. But Nick, I mean, this has been a great 40 minutes. We broke down every single position. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. Make sure you guys give a like. If you're listening on audio, we appreciate you guys. And Nick, as always, I appreciate you. Any final thoughts though before we head on out of here?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a busy few weeks, man. I mean, we'll
No
see
doubt.
kind of how many players decide to make early commitments. That's always, something to watch and pay attention to. But this staff's been doing a great job. I mean, already I think 11, known commitments right now. So it's going to be exciting. Appreciate you having me back and look forward to the next one.
Yes, sir. Everybody, we appreciate y'all, and we'll be back very soon.